Hey everybody, welcome back to Physical Therapy Private Practice Secrets of the Top 10%. I am really excited about this week's episode. We are going to be doing an in-depth dive into the State of Rehab Report from WebPT 2024. I have read it cover to cover, page to page, up and down, and I'll tell everybody honestly before we get started, this is the best report for my eyes and from my perspective in terms of usability and readability, and there is abundance of content there that I think everybody has to avail themselves to. So please, I know time is of the limit for so many of us. We're so busy, but this is well worth your time and well worth your read. And I think you guys will get a lot out of it. And for those of you who haven't yet, you're going to hopefully get a lot out of this week's podcast because I have Heidi herself. And Heidi, I must be honest, I do not say your last name properly and I don't want to hack it. So please say it for everybody.
Yes. Hi, everyone. It's Heidi Jannenga.
Really so easy when you say it.
Yeah.
It's so easy when you say it. Yeah. So that's Heidi Jannenga, and you guys all know her. So I'm just going to let her do just a brief introduction. And we have so much content. I'm not going to go on and on, everyone. We're going to dive into it, but I'm going to let Heidi open up. And why don't you start off with just a brief introduction and a little bit of background as to how many years you've been doing this, why are we doing this, and just your thoughts and feelings on the report.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, thank you, Brian. I am a physical therapist. I practiced for about 15 years in outpatient orthopedics and sports medicine before turning a tech entrepreneur with co-founding WebPT in 2008. Can't believe we're going on 17 years that we've been around. It's crazy. About 5 or 6 years in, in trying to source data to help improve what we were doing, the focus of our platform, we just weren't able to find that information. And so we started this State of Rehab Therapy report that started out as a small survey and has grown over the years and has really captured a following. And I have to give a tremendous shout out to our marketing team who every year comes up with a beautiful theme first and foremost, but then takes the time to pull all of this data into a beautiful report. And thank you, Brian, for the extra shout out to our team this year, as we've taken a lot of feedback from our readers over the years and transformed it slightly this year to be, in your words, a little more readable and absorbable in terms of the vast amount of data information that we put together. This year's theme is called the practice of the future. So we tailored the questions to really understand, where we've come post-COVID, the progress that we're showing. A lot of the same questions because we like to compare where we were last year to where we are in this particular year. And then also focusing on, where do we need to go to really make sure we're staying relevant as practice providers moving forward in the future.
Yeah, that's awesome. I love the way you pull it forward from the previous year forward. For all of you guys listening and any of you watching, I was talking to Heidi off air, and I was saying I really found this year's report for myself the best one yet. Not only is the content as good, I mean, the content's always good, so that's not what I'm evaluating, but the readability of it, because it's such a narrative format and it allows me to go through it and conceive of the concepts that are trying to be communicated. And I can go along the journey of the section by section without being interrupted with massive charts of data, which is so important and so valuable. But because I can get through the 29 page narrative, and then I get into all the supporting data that I can resource and source, it was just brilliant the way it went. So your team deserves a ton of credit, and of course yourself. But we all know that it's a heavy lift and it resides on the shoulders of many, not few. So I want to give that validation and acknowledgement to the people who put it together. Because for me, I literally was enjoying getting through it all. So why don't we kick off and let's like wrap our arms around the theme. Let's take the 30,000 foot, not view. That's not the right thing. That's a bad metaphor, but take the 30,000 foot message, I guess, because the message is I'll say, from my opinion, unlike years prior, I think the speed of technology, the speed of communication, the speed of development, the speed of innovation. Yes, people have been saying it's fast. It's nothing like it is today. And I think your report illustrates that, because I was like, from one subject to another subject, and every single one is like, literally, this is going to be out of date in like 6 weeks, not 6 months. So, what does it look like? The future of physical therapy private practice. I would like to get your comment on this, because what I bullet pointed to myself here was the future of physical therapy is a one-stop shop for musculoskeletal plus additional therapies. Number one. Number two, today's healthcare services are fragmented, and by 2030, the baby boomer generation will all be on Medicare. And number three, uh, we as physical therapy providers must be thought of first as the primary care option for musculoskeletal care. These are the three relevant points that the report was making right out of the gate. Like, there's a lot more to read, but grasp this concept that we are the leading providers of musculoskeletal care. Baby boomers are going to max out in 2030, and we must be thought of as the primary option for musculoskeletal care moving forward. What does that mean to you, Heidi?
Well, I mean, you nailed it as to how we should be thinking about ourselves and the confidence that we should have in the future of our profession, first and foremost, that we do have a place. It's a prominent place. It's an important, we're adding impact to our patients, and the patient volumes are only going to get bigger as we continue down this path in the next five to 10 years. And so, we've been saying this for a while, I think, because we've been anticipating this baby boomer wave, but it's truly here. And so making sure that we are amplifying those three things that you just talked about is going to be critically important. But how we do that moving forward, you are so correct in the acceleration of technology, social media, the digital aspect of how we get that message out to more people and even attract more people into understanding the value that we provide has got to change and also move at the pace that everyone else around us is moving. Healthcare always seems to be, I don't know, they say 10 years behind everywhere else. I feel like PT is another year or two behind that sometimes, just because of the limitations on our reimbursement and payment and things like that. But you nailed it when you talk about those very specific things. And we are at a really pivotal sort of place in having the opportunity to grasp those things that are right in front of us. And I think we're doing that. I think that the pace at which we as a profession are also embracing things is moving much more quickly than I'll even say we did when we made this transition when we first started at WebPT into the EMR, electronic medical health record sort of phase. The data is there now. And so being able to now take that data and derive meaningful conclusions as to treatment plans, arrival rates, all of the things that are going to help drive efficiencies within our businesses, but also add value to the patient experience, I think is what's really exciting to look forward to in this future as we embrace more technology.
100%. 100%. I mean, I'm going to date myself, 56 years old. I graduated in 1992. So everybody, birthday's coming up in 3 weeks, just to let everybody know. I will say this. When I got out of PT school, I remember just so focused on my diagnosis and plan of care diagnosis. Meniscus injury, what do I do? Rotator cuff injury, what do I do? What are, best practices for this condition? I must say, and I think you're saying, and I think this report illustrates this fact better than anything I've ever read up until today, to be honest with you. And I'm not just saying that. I think it communicates this point better than anything else. We as a profession have evolved beyond that. We have evolved to the point, and if you haven't, you need to. We have evolved to the point where we are now caring for the patient, the entire person. Our level of accountability has extended beyond the point of injury. It is now striving to achieve what I like to call optimum health. Optimum health for my 75-year-old is far different than optimum health for my 25-year-old patient, regardless of how they ended up in my office or in my care or in my mobile PT practice, in my cash-based practice. And I love the fact that the report makes that point. Like, the practice structure has evolved, not just the care delivery system, which is more about, like you said, like the report, we must be thought of first and foremost as the primary care option for musculoskeletal care. I've not read that before. Like, that just says it all. So well done on the report. I think it sends the right message. And to your point.
Well, and I'm glad that you are amplifying that message. It's definitely not a new message of being the MSK, specialist. I have to give credit to a lot of other people who've been beating that drum for a while now, including ourselves, including me. But it's got to be now data driven. It's not just about saying it. We have to prove it through our outcomes. And again, the data driven models are really what's going to make the difference. And so when you talk about embracing some of the changes in evolution, we've been fighting doing outcomes for such a long time. And while we're still not quite there yet with regard to truly having this full circle of payment reflecting the outcomes of your procedures and care that's being delivered, we are getting ever so close. And I think that is also accelerating faster than it has in the last 10 to 15 years. We will see. I know there's a lot of question marks right now with obviously the change in governmental leadership, as well as changes in HHS and all of that. So there's still some question marks, but I think for the most part, the train has left the station and people agree that something has to be done with regard to the cost of healthcare. And we could be absolutely a prominent provider to help reduce the cost when it comes to MSK issues, and which is, I think is now the actual most expensive thing specifically to most expensive expense to Medicare and their constituents.
Agreed. And you are correct. It's not, I'm in agreement with you 1,000%. It's not that others haven't been, shouting, we have to be the MSK care providers, but I felt like what I gleaned from the message was we must be thought of first. So you're saying it's not enough for us to believe it ourselves that we are that, like train ourselves to be that. You're saying we must convince the public to see us as that provider and come in through that way. And that's the part that I was like riveting on, because I'm like, it's not enough that we acquire the skills to be such. That's only half the journey. The other half of the journey is the public's awareness and acceptance of the fact that we are it. And then you went on to say, given, the influence of governmental pressures and all the external things that we don't have control over necessarily that get imposed upon us that are in some ways somewhat suppressive. Well, what we can do about that degree of suppression and economical pressure is we can be a greater value add. We can find a way that we could provide greater value. Like, I'm not one to talk much about cutting costs. I'm much more one to talk about adding value. How can we become a more cost-effective value in the healthcare arena? And that brings me to my next point. The ideal practice of the future, because now we have a concept of what that construct should look like. Well, what does it actually mean in in reality, it means that we are very convenient. We provide top level care. We have optimal outcomes, which I like to call optimal health. Like we actually improve optimal function of our patients. And this was a very interesting one I threw in there that you had on page 5, I believe it was, being financially agile and efficient. You know, this conversation, for those of you listening, Heidi and I are going to bounce back and forth between practice management, administrative chat and talk, and clinical, delivery, relevance. So just kind of hang with us as we bounce back and forth between those two arenas, because I think the complement of both is what really makes it work. So right now I'm talking more about the construct of a practice management, which WebPT has been putting a lot of emphasis on lately, with your patient management system that you're building, that you built. It's really great. But what do you mean, or what do you have in your mind, based on the data that you're looking at, that would achieve those objective factors of optimal outcomes, top level care, convenience? Give me an example of one of those. You can pick any one: convenience, top level care, optimal outcomes, or being financially agile. What comes to mind? Just give a hardcore example of one of those.
Yeah. So if we think about, let's take one on each side. Let's talk about the clinical care first. And so it's hard not to bring in sort of the bigger picture of the cost of delivery, right? Because at the end of the day, we're talking about trying to be more efficient and deliver an amazing patient experience, in which you think about how you live your life as an individual outside of a PT practice or outside of even healthcare in general, and what you then walk into and experience when you go into a PT practice or a hospital or any kind of healthcare, delivery system. And it's like going into a time warp sometimes, right? Depending on your age, but even if smartphones, the whole works, right? Everybody post-COVID is now carrying a smartphone and can do so many things just right here on your phone, right? And so if you are still, you don't have things that are automated, you don't have the ability to self-schedule, some of those things that people are so used to in their outside life, which they have gained efficiencies in other parts of their world, that should be translatable into what you're doing within your PT practice. So that would be one example, from an administrative task to streamline, to automate, to improve and simplify with regard to how a patient can even come into your practice or find you and schedule a visit. On the clinical side, we're talking about clinical decision support, driving optimal outcomes through helping understand more quickly all of the information that you've gathered. And I'll speak more futuristically here. If we can have wearable information that's being pulled in. So it's, to your point, we're treating the whole patient, not just when we see them one-on-one in our practice, whether that's through a digital screen or actually physically putting our hands on them. But now you have this information about them before they even walk in the door, of what they've been doing. Have they been doing their exercise programs? Those types of things, where now your time efficiency and understanding, how can I most impact this patient in front of me, to give them the most optimal care, in your words. How do I do that in my 15 minutes, my 30 minutes that I have with them, right? And so it's this synthesizing of more information that can be put right in front of you to give you a few suggestions. I'm not going to say answers, because it is still important for us to have our clinical brains to be able to take that information and truly understand what, in this particular case, in this particular patient, is going to be most optimal for them. But the suggestiveness of clinical decision support, I think, is really what we're talking about on the clinical side, as an example.
Yeah, 100%. And I made some notes here, 7 pages of notes actually. But I love the idea of, I'm skipping ahead just to echo what you're saying, a digital solution. Just simply put, a practice of the future is going to have digital solutions. Digital solutions could be a patient portal, giving patients greater access to their records in a more efficient way. Like you said, scheduling from home. If I want my car oil change, I don't call anybody. I just go right to the thing and I put myself in for Friday at 10 at the open slot and I book my appointment and I go get my car. Who's listening to me who doesn't have that on your website? You don't have that integrated. Your practice experience management system, PXM, right, is the answer. I mean, it's actually the relevance of integrating this kind of digital solution to the practice and patient experience, right? So
Yeah.
I think a lot of us who are in practice right now, we have to look around and see what we're doing. And are we practicing in 1998 or are we in 2025? And what can we do about that and how we can catch up? Because, our therapists then, bouncing back, thinking about the clinician's viewpoint, because you obviously harvested a lot of feedback and moving this report forward from the viewpoint of both practice, clinical, and respondent. Our respondents are still very concerned, and I listed their top 5 concerns: decreased reimbursement, burnout, salaries not keeping up. For many of the people that call me, wanting to remain independent, wanting to be an independent physical therapy private practice. I live in a county of 10,000 people. I'd love to have a clinic with 2 therapists and just providing good care to the people in my neighborhood, right? Increase regulatory burdens. I mean, these are the top 5 things that the report puts in front of us. Heidi, when you talk to people and they comment on these things, I consider these challenges. Everybody who knows me knows I don't really use the word problems often. To me, a problem is something that's outside of my control. A hurricane bearing down on my house, that's a problem. That's a problem. But decreased reimbursement, that's a challenge. These are just life challenges. What advice do you give when people, you obviously are harvesting this feedback all the time, and in some form or fashion, you must offer some degree of hope or some degree of perspective, or what to say, what's relevant to say back?
Yeah, so part of it is first and foremost, I also see things as opportunities. And when you have challenges, you're trying to figure out, well, what do I need to do different or, to change to meet that challenge? And, part of it, I'll just say 3 out of the 5 things that you have on that list, like it comes down to advocacy. That we don't have control over ourselves, but we do have control over our voice and where we put our dollars, whether that's in a pack of some sort to help influence, and whether we like it or not, this is the reality of living in the United States. This is how things can change, right? And so it's still such a small percentage of people within our profession that actually give funds to the PT PAC or, that belong to the APTQI, who also has an amazing PAC, right? So these dollars and efforts and work that are being done to lobby and hopefully change things towards the future to get more of what we started this conversation about, the impact of physical therapists, the value that we deliver, the cost savings that we can deliver to the overall healthcare system, has to get known by the people that actually create the laws and put the policies together. So first and foremost, I always ask them, like, have you contributed to the PAC, right? Have you actually done something to try to make a difference in this area? And I know, people will say, well, I gave money and nothing ever happened. Well, go influence 20 more people to do that, because it takes a lot of funds to be able to make change in the reality of where we are in U.S. politics and government, right? So that would be the first thing that I do, is kind of push back a little bit to say, what are you doing to change 3 out of those 5 things?
That's a great message. That's a great message, Heidi. And I love the way the report goes on to say that advocacy can be done on a local level and a global level.
Yes.
And local and global are, they're both equally important, right? But, it's so funny you say that. How many people complain to me about how things are and how things aren't the way they should be? And I'm like, well, do you donate to your PAC? Do you contribute your time? Have you, I've been to DC. I've done the march on I've walked the Senate floors. I thrive on that kind of stuff because I can't complain about a problem I'm not willing to participate in the solution on. So for those of you listening, I say this all the time. 2 things and 2 reasons why I do what I do and I wake up out of bed every day is because I want to help improve the lives of every physical therapy owner, live the dream that you've envisioned for yourself. That's number 1. And number 2, I want to advance the profession of physical therapy. Because y'all know, and I've said this 1,000 times, physical therapy is the second best profession in the world. Obviously, the first best profession is a professional baseball player. How much better could you get than that? You don't play in the rain. You don't have to hit anybody. You don't even have to lift anything really heavy. You just get to play in the sunshine. So physical therapy, the second best profession in the world. Heidi is right. If you cherish and value the profession that you've been given and you feel blessed in gratitude, then you must contribute to its future. And so I think that's really great. On that list, I said burnout, right? Separate was one of them. And that's the one that's the closest to my heart. And the reason is because I feel that's the one that has the most emotional impact. It has the most physical impact. It has the most family dynamic impact. I mean, maybe I'm wrong, but in my mind, if someone's deflated on the motivation of the profession they just invested 6 years of their life in, and according to statistics, an average of $150,000 to get that piece of paper.
Yep.
I just take that one a little bit more to heart, right or wrong. That's just me. Everybody can pick their own. So I'm going to ask you just a blank question on that.
Yep.
What action do you think is going to create a greater effect on reducing burnout? Having staff be paid better or better staffing, hiring, and retention?
Well, first I'll just say that we did see a bit of a reprieve this year with the reduction in people calling out burnout as a reason that they were putting in their resignation.
I saw that.
The number one reason that people are sort of in this burnout mode is more about what we just talked about, the administrative burden of, documenting it, having to take documentation home to do. And it's it's not this work-life balance that millennials and even Gen Z are craving, just isn't what they thought it might be. And so specifically to your question, it's number 2, like just paying somebody more money, although student debt is a huge issue in our profession as well. It's still not commensurate when we think about, we're a doctorate level professional, but what we get paid is not necessarily commensurate to what the expectation would be in comparison to PAs and others that are at the same sort of education level. And so I would say that 100% right now, the bigger thing is really working on retention, valuing the employees that you have, showing that value in whether it's educational opportunities. I'll say just with Rising Tide, our foundation, we're working with a lot of students these days, and the lack of confidence coming out of PT school. I'm kind of a similar age, Brian. When I came out of PT school, it was just, even though you may not have been of confidence in your skills, there was just this thought that, yes, I can come out and practice. I could treat anybody.
Yeah.
Right. And today I feel like maybe because of our specialization and obviously advancement of a lot of the procedures and things that we're doing, there's a little bit lack of confidence in what I see out there with our new grads of being really able to just dive in and say, you know what, bring it on. And so I think that the, continuing education, the sort of just making sure you're sort of wrapping them with additional opportunities to learn and shadow mentorship, all of those types of things are key right now to really having great retention with your teams.
Yeah, you touched on so many important points in answering that question. And I would agree with you. I would say it's B, better staff hiring and retention. And that's not, and to your point and to mine, that's not to be dismissive of the challenges with pay. And staff pay is still a serious concern. And it's still in my mind, demands a greater attention. It's still very upsetting to me that a massage therapist with 12 months of study and certification is getting $85 a visit. And I have people in upstate New York that are scrapping for 68 and they have a doctorate degree in physical therapy. Something's wrong with that picture. And I don't blame the massage therapist.
So Brian, I'm gonna interrupt you really quick. That I think that is absolutely true. But when you're talking about 65 or $60 a visit, you're talking about insurance reimbursement, and a massage therapist gets cash.
That's correct.
Like that is also a key evolution that we have to feel good about is actually leveraging cash pay as an alternative revenue stream to diversify and increase the potential of revenue because we could command $85 a visit.
100%. 100%. I have some of my cash-based owners getting $200 an eval, $150 a visit all day long. They're booked every day. And you know what? They're getting their value. They're getting the real, because they're providing that degree of value. For those of us that are unfortunately in those environments that have to accept or choose to accept, to your point, these decrease. I mean, I had somebody say, yeah, it's $37 a visit. I said, what are you doing? Like, what are you literally doing? So I understand that 100%. And very, very good point. And, regarding the burnout, and we'll move off this topic, you're right. The report clearly delineates that a year ago it was 11% and now it's down to 9.2. So it's moving in the right direction. And one of the things I think contribute to it, and I'd like to get your opinion on this concept as well, I noticed that the average visits per day is now 10 visits per day. I was reading that and, I remember when it was 14 to 16 a day, right? And then it was 12 to 14 and now it's 10. And then I got to, pause and just thought about it a bit. It's because of what you just said. More and more of our peers are going to cash-based services, which is more of a one-on-one case interaction, which increases the value of the services being delivered. So, that's not a bad number when you think about, we're moving in that direction. And not to say that I think every patient should be a 1-hour appointment. I'm not advocating that by any stretch. I think some of the best therapists in the world are in New Zealand and Canada and Australia, and their numbers are totally different, and rightly so. But it does bring to the awareness that people are saying enough's enough. I am not going to see 18 to 22 patients a day because I got to make up for the low reimbursement per visit. So I think that's relevant.
I will say that it was refreshing to also see that a pretty significant, I think it was 56% of practices that kind of the medium-sized practices who have a little bit more leverage with their, insurance contracts are actually negotiating with these bad payers. So they're just saying no to the $55 a visit, right? Because they're losing money every time one of those patients comes in the door. And it's not fair, right? Yeah. And so I love that we're starting to advocate for ourselves in that regard and, saying no to these poor paying contracts, because at the end of the day, it's only, minimizing the value that we're delivering. And it diminishes everybody when, one practice is willing to say, oh, we'll take that contract. And so I was really pleased to see more and more folks are pushing back and even going out of network, which, is hard because, it puts the burden back onto the patient, but patients can sometimes be our biggest advocates as well. So as we were talking about advocacy, it's not just our own professional and professionals within our profession. It's got to be talking to the patients about talking to their constituents their legislative folks and knowing who they are and having that conversation.
And that's a very good point, because aren't the patients members of our community, and aren't we members of that community? So aren't we all equally members of the same community? And if we are, wouldn't we want to see, to your charity, high tide rises all boats, right? Isn't that what we're asking our patients to do, is to support a local business by helping us fight the fight, right? I mean, the largest insurer in the United States, the 3-lettered one, I won't say, what did they do? A $10 billion profit in 2020, $10 billion profit. And yet the average reimbursement they're putting out for PT is like $51 to $58 a visit all across the country. It's literally shameful. And believe me, I'm a capitalist. I believe you base everything on the merit of what you achieve for sure. But to some point, this is people's health. I mean, this is their, anyways, I could go crazy on that one, but I'm not going to do that. Um, I want to give a shout out to Keaton Ray. I mean, she was quoted in the article, and she has a wildly successful cash base, with Movement X. And I know her and I know her team. They're very upbeat and they're very, positive in nature. And I think that's what people gravitate towards. So just a quick shout out to her and her group, because I think you interviewing her and getting her in the article was relevant because she's making a difference. She's her group, not her alone, obviously, but they're making a really good difference, big difference on
Yeah,
that.
Movement X is definitely paving the way for more organizations to understand best practices in leveraging cash pay.
Yeah.
I'm on their board of advisors. So huge shout out to Josh Keaton, Fred, and the team.
But
They're killing it and just doing really, really great things and delivering outstanding care first and foremost, and elevating just what it means to be a physical therapist and the potential to make a good wage, see patients, and not feel some of that same stress that others might be doing, where it's all about volume, chasing volume.
yeah, 100%. I wanted to come back and touch on a topic, and we'll keep moving on. But you mentioned about the preparation and confidence of our new grads of today versus 5 years ago or further. And I do see it. I see what you see. I hear the same thing. An engineering student graduates from University of Delaware in engineering, gets a job at Gore. They walk in day one, they get their desk, their pen, and their computer, and they're working. It's like, you're an engineer. Let's get to work. And yet our physical therapists come out and they don't feel prepared. They feel like they need this like slow roll, walk into and I have my opinions on that. What are your opinions? Why is that? Just like really quick. Why do you think that is?
Well, I think there's been quite a bit of change in the academic sort of arena. We did move to this doctorate level professional, which um, psychologically, perhaps people feel like there's a different level of expectation that comes out of, the clinician that is a doctor of physical therapy. Perhaps they feel that from even patients, right? That you're expected to have all the answers. Um, I will go back to there has been an incredible amount of improvement in specialization in understanding, which is again good and bad, right? Because if you're a pelvic health specialist, like coming out as a generalist which is the expectation of the DPT program today. If you were going to go out to be in a clinic that was only seeing pelvic health patients, that would be really difficult to do. And so I think that, I'm a huge evidence in motion fan, in sort of the delivery model with Larry Benz and John Childs, and how they've really turned the PT sort of DPT education on its head a bit with how they think about things. But, I think the future even of DPT education is probably going to evolve to bring in sort of this residency component into the actual curriculum, to where you can, similar to the medical model, where you come out as a much more specialized individual, but you could also take this primary care kind of path where you could be more of a generalist, where it's an all-in-one versus choosing to then go off to do these things. And so anyway, I think there's some evolution that still needs to happen to meet the demands of where we are from an industry, marrying that up with academics.
I agree. I think you're right on all accounts. My opinion is also, I think there's been somewhat of an influence that hasn't been necessarily positive. In that, I don't know, what was it like when you graduated, Heidi? How many affiliations did you go on when you went through school?
I did four different stints. My first one was like a week at different practices, so it was really dipping your toe in.
Yeah.
And then I did two 8 weeks and I think one 4 week.
Excellent. I did five. So we did fives all together. And I think a combination of, I don't think many schools do that many anymore. I think that has reduced. And I think another point in the report is the hybrid study, the learn from afar. We are a touch profession. We are a touch profession for, and that's not to say that I'm not all, telehealth is not, doesn't have its place, and it does. And we can see that shrinking since the pandemic as well. The report shows that, and that's going to level off probably where it should. But at the end of the day, we are very much a live in person, touch for the overwhelming majority of things. But that doesn't mean exclusively, for sure. I'm open to both. But I think we have some students now that are just studying physical therapy from the comforts of their living room in a lot of ways, and I think you lose a little bit of that team building and that confidence. I remember when I played soccer competitively and I made the team to go play over in Europe. Well, it made you feel more accomplished because you could see your level of performance in comparison. And I think you lose a little of that when you study from home. You don't really get to take that self-acknowledgement for what you're actually learning and knowing about. And I think that's being lost a little bit. So
Yeah. Yeah,
that's just me.
I definitely can agree. I mean, I know it's similar to work from home. I mean,
Yeah,
it's a
yeah.
much different environment. Even at WebPT, when we were all together, rubbing shoulders together, walking through the hallways, you cross pollinate information differently. For sure, the bonding is really important, but even bonding, I guess, in your point to the profession as a whole, I'll say just even for employees to bond with the mission and vision of an organization is
Yeah.
much more difficult to do when you're working from home. So I totally agree. I do think that there's still, as I mentioned, an evolution because I think the didactic work of the book learning that has to be done I think is can be done more remotely, but perhaps there's just a long elongated period of more in person, but the hands-on work, right? The labs, the
Yeah.
tissue, the
Yeah.
evaluative skills, those types of things I don't want to lose because that is still our secret sauce as a profession, in my opinion.
Yeah. Good point. Good point. I agree with you. Um, yeah, the clerical didactic kind of stuff could be done at home, and there's some relevance there. Let's slide into solutions, and then I'm going to hit you with my two big questions at the end. We've spent a lot of time, as many of you know, as you're hearing us dialogue here, we're just having these conversations and I'm just throwing topics out there, but I'm not diving into the numbers, everybody, because you need to read the report and get into those numbers. That doesn't make for a fun podcast to throw all these spreadsheets of numbers around. But what I think does is my podcast is about personal growth ideas, PGIs, and tips for professional success. And I always like to touch on some personal growth ideas and tips for professional success. So I think what we can summarize that Heidi and I are speaking to is personal growth idea number one. And I think we've covered it in part and parcel. And I think, in Heidi, if I'm misreading what our conversation has been about thus far, please correct me. But I think what we're trying to say is when you put your focused attention on quality, you will get quantity. Focus more on the quality of what you're doing, and it will give you greater quantity. I can't stress that enough. What this report is telling us is where can we elevate the quality of our patient care experience, the quality of our company culture, the quality of the appreciation. People need to be acknowledged for who they are and validated for what they accomplish and do. I'm a big believer in making sure that my role and responsibility is to acknowledge and validate on an ongoing basis. I think this report speaks to that as you see the respondents' biggest concerns. So I think that data sits right there. Would you agree, Heidi?
Yeah, I would definitely agree when it comes to, really, and we talked a little bit about this earlier. Um, we were in the midst of a crisis. We lost a lot of people out of this profession, and so retention of those that are now coming out of school who have survived that sort of wave of
Mhm.
resignation and now are here and want to be part of this profession, um, and love what they do, want to feel that. And so the retention components are exactly what you say. However, and not even however, but just the tides also from a business mind, like we also have to be able to pay these people, our employees, what they deserve and should be getting. And in order to do that, we have to figure out how do we become more efficient as a practice, operationally, to be able to put more dollars into some of the things that will improve the overall patient and employee experience.
I agree, and that segues perfectly as to where I'm going. That's 100% correct. I agree with you 1,000%. Um, you know, oh, I had a thought there about what you said about the company culture and the individuals. I'm going to come back to it, but I wanted to focus on solutions with the time that we have left. Um, you guys have invested a lot of time, energy, effort, and resources in developing um, your practice experience management system, your PXM, and what that has is to create greater levels of efficiency, greater levels of information attainment, and it really just results in greater productivity because where we can economize is on the practice management side, the administrative functions, and you call it in the report the digital solution. And I would like you to just expand a little bit so people have a greater understanding of what benefit they can get within that system of WebPT, because I'm 100% on the same boat as you that we need to squeeze greater efficiency out of the administrative side, the practice management side, so that we can have a better clinical delivery system. How is that accomplished when you look at the system you've built? How are you accomplishing that?
Yeah, so as we looked at the data, we'll take part responsibility, in terms of, administrative burden is still the biggest area of concern when we think about burnout
Yeah.
and what's causing people to perhaps turn away from healthcare in general, but definitely from, if we just micro focus on our own industry and profession. And so we want to be that easy button. We want, WebPT has always been trying to remove the burden of the regulatory compliance that you have to keep up with, to where we will take care of all of that, to where you can get back to doing the treatment of the patient, right? You don't have to think about all the check boxes. Are all these things being done in order for you to, from an insurance standpoint, I's dotted, T's crossed, to make sure that you're going to get paid for your services in the most efficient manner. And so we're always constantly trying to improve that ability to create a note, the most compliant way of creating a note, making sure you have all of that information that you need as fast as possible to reduce that sort of administrative burden, the bane of our existence as physical therapists, right? That we have to do all of this documentation components. Um, and now sort of our focus is really now, how do we bring AI, how do we bring this mountain of data that we've now collected over the last 17 years to bear, to actually produce more efficiencies and information to the clinician, to the front office staff, to improve their overall efficiency as well. We've partnered with Prediction Health to really help on the clinical side, to really start to transform how notes are starting to be written. much more efficiently. Again, we talked about the clinical decision support, treatment plan creation, all of these types of things is what you're starting to see and will continue to see much more progress this year in 2025 within WebPT.
100%. I keep, we're so aligned. I would add to that as well. In parallel, there's this digital solution that you guys are just refining and perfecting, which is just a beautiful thing. And everybody has to take advantage of every innovative piece of technology they can. The report goes on to say, 40% of front desk staff turnover is the going rate right now, and 33% of business operational staff. We have thrown our efforts into aligning with technology and services. We like Virtual Sally. We like the newbie eSIM from NewFit for clinical use for both cash-based, insurance-based, out-of-network based. So we try to find these connections as well that can be extremely advantageous to the practice owner. What we have found over the last 5 years is the migration of the younger generation is much more about, can't you just do this for me? Can't you do the end-to-end services for me so I can get to the business of running a physical therapy practice? You go to a hair salon today, my wife goes in, 10 years ago, somebody signed you in, somebody washed your hair, somebody cut your hair. Nobody's doing it. It's one person. She does everything from front to back. She sweeps the floor, washes the mirrors, puts her stuff away, and it's end-to-end, So if I can develop, we call it the progressive PT practice model. If I can utilize we're big partners with WebPT. We do a lot of billing with your software. We're great. We're great. For those of you listening, here's the thing I want to kind of get you to think with. I go forward with all my business associate relationships with this concept, and I'm going to write an article on it, and I've been developing it. It's called collaborative capitalism. In other words, if I can collaborate with Heidi and her group, and in a way, our collaborative relationship has a mutual beneficial outcome for the capitalistic goals, dreams, and objectives of each one of our companies independent. She doesn't have to buy me out. I don't have to buy her out. I couldn't buy WebPT out if I wanted, but we don't have to do that. You don't have to give up part of but you can literally have a collaborative capitalistic relationship as long as your products align, as long as your purposes align, and obviously they do. So with that said, I'm providing end-to-end outsourcing solutions, not staffing. I don't want to give you a staff member from somewhere around the world or somewhere here in the United States that is now your headache to manage. That's hard enough for people to do, because the private practice owners of this world, they are fishing in their zip code to get a good quality person to work their front desk. And the people in your zip code is a very small pond. And the ability for you to keep
especially your pond.
Yeah. It's very hard. So, we're fortunate that we're in 43 different states, and we're sourcing that so we can provide virtual front desk, virtual assistant, IVO authorization officer, billing officer, account control officer, collections officer. We can control that. And collaborating with WebPT, as I view a collaborative capitalistic relationship, which we've had for years, just advances you, the listener, and having a practice that you have less to manage, less on your payroll, less to do. And as technology advances, there will be even fewer people. Hey, look, I go to a restaurant now in the airport and it's an iPad. I mean, I can order my food, get my food. It's an iPad, right? It's going to get there. But in the meantime, I'm going to try and help as many people by sourcing the people I have. So anyways, that was me talking really fast and getting a whole bunch of information out there. I'm sorry for you guys. I'm going to end off with this, though, so I can take a little bit of a breath. Heidi, you do this every year. Your group is phenomenal at doing it. You must have something that you're hoping they walk away as a result of studying the report, reading the report. What did they learn? What do you hope? Here's my two-part question. What do you hope people are learning, or the takeaways they're walking away from this report? Because I know I verbalize a lot of what I got. But what else, in addition to what you hope they learn, what do you hope they absorb from that? What do you hope they do differently with it? What do you hope the outcome of changes as a result of doing this every year? Let's share that with everybody.
Well, first and foremost, it's all about consuming and connecting and understanding that you're not in a silo, and that some of the challenges that you are experiencing as an individual are probably challenges that are being experienced throughout the entire profession. Because sometimes I think we're so, especially with smaller practices, I mean, we're so heads down. and we are trying, we feel like we're on that hamster wheel and we're just trying new things, and some things are working, a lot of things are not working. And so understanding that there's a bigger picture that, of resources and other things that are available, I think is really important, because, we still have a large percentage of our overall member base is, very small practices, which we're super proud of. And so giving this information in a consumable way, really at the end of the day was our number one reason for doing this. And then being able to think about, well, here's all of the challenges alongside of some opportunities for them to think about in potential solutions, picking and choosing a few that maybe you're prioritizing as the biggest challenge that you're having within your own practice, to say, I'm going to attack this year. And so, hey, where's telehealth going? Well, telehealth is not probably going to grow as much this year. How is that going to affect my own business? Is this even feasible? Probably not in my area. This is not something that, our patients are really clamoring for. So that's not something I want to pay attention to. But I do want to pay attention to more efficiency in my front office, because I have had that turnover in my front office, and it's really a burden to me as either an owner, or it's a burden to my staff, right? And so how do I then think about having more efficiency in my front office? How do I diversify my revenue streams to allow me to do more of the things that I want? It's providing an opportunity to see solutions in a very consumable way. It's kind of like, your chat GPT for a PT practice. Like, here's all your list of the things that you potentially could do. Now you take this information and use it to your best benefit of how it's going to improve your own practice. And, at the end of the day, we want PTs to achieve greatness in practice. That's been our mission from the beginning. And to serve it up in a way that they can position their practices to thrive in this obviously very rapidly changing healthcare landscape. And we obviously, as you have pointed out, we like to address both the clinician and the patient side of things. So anyway, that's a long-winded sort of answer, I guess, but it is choose your own adventure. Like, we are serving all of this valuable information up with some potential opportunities for improving those challenges. And so it's really up to you as the individual to intake that information and do what's best in your practice based on your own priorities.
Yeah. Very well said. Very well said. I'm going to end with this, everybody. I'm going to ask myself the same two questions. I will not do as good a job as Heidi. She just gave you such a eloquent, very fully comprehensive answer to those questions. But the question is, when I pick up the report every year, and I'm very fortunate and very blessed that Heidi asks me to participate in to whatever capacity in that, or WebPT conferences, or anything that I can do, I try to challenge myself to, what is my takeaway? What did I learn? What am I coming away from that? And this is reminiscent for me of years ago, too many years ago, like 25 years ago. Probably like 20. We sent out surveys, and we got 141 surveys back, and we surveyed physicians. This is when I was in private practice. And we surveyed physicians. Well, I was coaching at that time, and so it was in that capacity. And we asked the physicians one question: what makes you send your patients to clinic A for physical therapy over clinic B? One question. 600 surveys went out, 141 came back. I'll never forget it. I remember the number. And the number one answer was so far in front of the rest, none of the rest even mattered. I don't even know what the other answers were. I mean, it's so insignificant. The number one answer was, by physicians, I send my patients to clinic A over clinic B based on the patient care results spoken to me by the patient. And I found that so significantly relevant that it directed and drove my foundation of what my future actions were, because I was able to understand the state of the union, the lay of the land from a perspective other than my own. I was able to embrace the perspective of my referring physician's viewpoint and do something with that. So question one is, I think what I learned from reading the State of Rehab from WebPT each and every year is I learn a new perspective of the state of the union in real time from the perspective of others. I know where I stand, but I don't have that filtering input of feedback. And this is the only source that I can tell you guys who are listening that you're going to get that. And so that's my answer to question number one. My answer to question number two is, what do I do differently in my life because of it? Well, I think, and I hope you guys who read the report share in the same feeling. It drives me to have greater confidence in my decision making because I can stand on the shoulders of the data that has been harvested and is so sound and relevant in my profession. So because of the work done by the team at WebPT to assemble a body of data that is so sound and so relevant to my future profession, I can stand on the shoulders of that and make more educated, more confident decisions in my upcoming business strat plan because of it. So that's what I hope all of you who listen take away from this. I hope that's what you get from this podcast. I know Heidi and I will never stop trying to do the best by the profession and best by you as a private practice owner. So thank you very much for listening. Heidi, I'm going to let you have the last word. My last word to everybody is, as always, live the life you envision for yourself as a PT practice owner or want to be a practice owner, and give back to the profession of physical therapy and start every day expecting to do well. And Heidi, last parting words.
Yeah, Brian, thank you so much. And as I reflect onto your two questions, I would say just succinctly, and what I hope they learn and take away from this particular year's State of Rehab Therapy report is to, number one, diversify your revenue streams.
Yes.
Really think about what revenue and where your revenue is coming from. And if you're don't have cash pay, if you're not thinking about, direct to employer programs or these other types of reimbursement models, that you absolutely should be considering that in 2025 and 2026, because a lot of times we're strategically planning at the end of one year. So as you think about moving into the next year, number two would be to really look at your efficiency within your practice and where can you leverage technology. We talked about the acceleration of it, and AI is coming. It's coming to the profession. It's coming to healthcare in general. But how do you slowly start to add more technology and advancement of integrated tools into your practice? And then I'll just end similar to you, like, please don't stop advocating for our profession. Like, we have a lot of those things on the list that we individually can't affect, but collectively we can absolutely make a difference. And that comes with, the advocacy legislatively, within your state, nationally, all of that. So thank you, Brian, for the great work that you continue to do with this podcast and all the work that you do for our profession. Always so great to be here with you. So thanks for the invite that you do annually. So we really appreciate it.
Thank you, Heidi. It's my pleasure. And thank you for making the time to be here. So everybody, get out there and do what you do best, outsource the rest, and leverage technology for your advanced future success. That's my message. That's it. Parting words. I know I said I'd give it to Heidi, but I can't shut up. So there you go, everybody. Have a good one. Take care now. Bye-bye.
Happy New Year, everyone.